Football is more than a game. It's a rhythm, a culture, a way of life. It creates heroes, and sometimes it breaks hearts. We remember the goals, the trophies, the records, but we rarely talk about the silence that follows when a career ends too soon. The deaths that stop time, the moments where football didn't matter because someone was gone. And it's not always old legends quietly fading. Sometimes it's a rising star, sometimes it's a player in their prime, sometimes it's a freak accident, and sometimes it's something darker. From planes that never landed, to goals that cost more than just a match, to players who smiled on camera days before they never came back. These are the stories that shook football to its core, the kind that don't need highlight reels, because what we lost wasn't just talent, it was people, it was potential, it was sons, brothers, teammates, captains. In the next 30 minutes, we're not just looking at numbers or match stats, we're going deeper. We're revisiting 10 of the most shocking, heartbreaking, and unforgettable deaths in modern football history. Some you already know, some you've tried to forget, and some you're about to feel for the first time. From global icons like Diego Maradona to young stars like Emiliano, Sala, and Diogo Jota, to entire teams lost in the air, to men who played a game and never walked off the pitch again. This isn't meant to sensationalize, it's to remember, to respect, and to try to understand what happened and why it hit so hard. This is the other side of football, the side without trophies, the side with funerals, and the side that proves, more than anything, that these players were human. 1. Diego Maradona, the god of football. Before Messi, before Ronaldo, there was Diego. Diego Armando Maradona didn't play football, he lived it, like it was war and art and religion all at once. He came from the dirt streets of Villa Fiorito, a slum outside Buenos Aires, with nothing but a ball and a dream. By 16, he was playing for Argentinos Juniors. By 18, he was a national obsession. And by 25, he was a global icon. But Maradona was never just a player. He was a movement. He was a myth. He was the kind of footballer that made grown men cry, not because of nostalgia, but because what he did shouldn't have been possible. 1986 proved it. The World Cup in Mexico. In the span of 4 days, Maradona redefined greatness. Against England, the hand of God. And then, 4 minutes later, the goal of the century. 2 goals, one illegal, one immortal. That was Diego, divine and defiant sometimes in the same breath. At Napoli, he became more than a star. He became a saint. He took a struggling southern club and made them kings of Italy, not once but twice. Statues went up, churches were built, and when he left, he didn't just leave a club, he left a city shattered. But off the pitch, the story turned. Addiction, scandal, suspensions. A man who once controlled games couldn't always control himself. His genius came with a cost, and he paid it in health, in peace, in reputation. He lived like he played, full throttle, heart first, even when it hurt, even when it broke him. On November 25, 2020, Maradona died of heart failure. He was 60. Argentina declared 3 days of national mourning. Napoli renamed their stadium after him. Murals, songs, tattoos, tears, because for many, Maradona was more than the best to ever do it. He was hope. He was fight. He was proof that magic could exist on muddy pitches and in broken lives. He was flawed. He was furious. He was everything football was never supposed to be, and everything it needed to be. Diego Maradona is gone, but his shadow still dances on every pitch. 2. Emiliano Sala, the flight that never landed. Emiliano Sala was never supposed to be famous like this. He wasn't a viral sensation. He didn't have a signature move. He just scored goals quietly, consistently, honestly. A late bloomer who worked his way up from French second division football to the top of Ligue 1. By 28, he was finally getting his break. A dream move to the Premier League. Cardiff City had signed him for £15 million, a club record fee. He said goodbye to his teammates in Nantes, packed his bags, took a private plane. He was supposed to land in Wales that night. He never did. The aircraft, a small Piper Malibu, disappeared over the English Channel. For hours, no one knew what had happened. Then days. Then the search was called off. Fans, friends, and players begged for it to resume. Eventually, the wreckage was found. The plane had crashed into the sea. Salah's body was recovered from the debris. The pilot was never found. The football world froze. This wasn't just a tragedy, it was negligence. The investigation revealed a horror story. The pilot, David Ibbotson, wasn't licensed to fly at night. The plane itself wasn't properly cleared. The flight had been arranged by an agent, informal, under the radar. Salah had even messaged friends mid-flight. "This plane looks like it's falling apart." At that moment, he probably knew. And he couldn't do anything. Emiliano Salah's death raised massive questions. How could a transfer worth millions be handled so carelessly? How could a professional footballer die like this, not on the pitch, but in paperwork? FIFA ordered Cardiff to pay Nantes. Cardiff refused. Lawsuits followed. His legacy got dragged into boardrooms and tribunals. But to fans, none of that mattered. What mattered was the loss of a good man, a hard-working striker, a player just beginning to live his dream. He never got to play a single match in the Premier League, but he was already a Premier League player, and always will be. Emiliano Salah's story isn't just sad, it's infuriating, because it didn't have to end like this. But it did, and football is still trying to figure out why. 3. Diogo Jota, the sudden silence. Some football deaths feel inevitable: age, illness, wear and tear. Others hit like thunder. Diogo Jota's death wasn't expected. It wasn't something fans could prepare for. It wasn't something that made sense. At 28 years old, Jota was in his prime. A key player for Liverpool, a trusted weapon for Portugal, a forward who could press like Klopp wanted, finish like a poacher, and find space where no one else was looking. He didn't play with flair. He played with instinct, timing, grit. Not the flashiest, not the loudest, but always effective, always respected. And then, gone. Just like that. His Lamborghini in a fireball after a burst tire. Him and his brother. Gone. No warning, no build-up. Just a name trending for the worst reason. Fans scrolled, thinking it was a rumor, a hoax, a mistake, until it wasn't. The football world went quiet. Liverpool players and staff released statements. Portugal's national team held a moment of silence. Clubs across Europe posted tributes. And fans who had watched him score winning goals just months earlier couldn't believe what they were seeing. There were no headlines about scandals. No long backstory. Just shock, just grief. Jota wasn't a legend yet, but that was the point. He still had chapters left to write, tournaments to play, trophies to lift, goals to score that might have made history. We'll never know. And maybe that's what hurts the most. It's not just that he died, it's that everything he could have become died with him. In football, we measure players by numbers, appearances, goals, assists, minutes played. But Jota's story reminds us of the stat we never track: how much time they had left. Diogo Jota is gone, but in Portugal, in Liverpool, in dressing rooms and highlight reels, you'll still hear his name. Not because of how his story ended, but because of everything it promised before it did. 4. Jose Antonio Reyes, the speed that never stopped. Jose Antonio Reyes was born fast, not just on the pitch in life. He was 16 when he made his debut for Sevilla. By 20, he was at Arsenal. By 21, he was an invincible. But Reyes was never just a stat line. He was chaos with his left foot. The kind of winger who didn't care if you were a fullback or a fan, he was going past you anyway. Dribble, cut, shoot, repeat. Pure, unfiltered energy, and always with a smile. He was the first Spaniard to win the Premier League. He lifted trophies in England, Spain, and Portugal, and he did it all without ever really slowing down. Until one day, he did. June 1st, 2019. Reyes was driving with two cousins on a highway near his hometown, Utrera. They were going fast, too fast. Reports say the car reached up to 230 kilometers per hour, over 140 miles per hour. A tire blew. The car flipped. It burst into flames. Reyes and one cousin died at the scene. The other passed away later from burns. He was 35, married, a father, still playing professional football, still in love with the game. The news hit hard, not just because of who he was, but because of how suddenly he was gone. Sevilla cancelled training. Arsenal players posted tributes. Atletico, Real Madrid, and Benfica all paid their respects, because Reyes had played for all of them. And at every stop, they remembered his speed, his joy, and his heart. His funeral was public. Fans lined the streets. Sevilla draped his coffin in club colours and carried him through the Ramon Sanchez Pizjuan, the stadium where it all began and ended. Jose Antonio Reyes didn't die because he was reckless. He died because he never knew how to slow down. Not on the wing. Not behind the wheel, not in life. And maybe that's the part that hurts the most. The speed that once made him unstoppable, it was the same thing that stopped everything. 5. Gary Speed, the smile no one saw behind. Gary Speed had one of those careers that most footballers dream of and never reach. A Premier League regular, a captain, a leader. The kind of player who didn't just show up, he lasted. More than 800 professional matches, more than 100 Wales caps, a reputation built on professionalism, consistency, and quiet excellence. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't loud, but he was always there. Trusted, respected, steady. After retiring, he took on a new challenge, managing Wales. A team in disarray, no direction, no identity. In just 1 year, Gary Speed gave them both. He believed in young players like Gareth Bale and Aaron Ramsey. He brought pride back to the shirt. And then, on November 27th, 2011, he was gone. Found dead at his home. Hanged. Suicide. He had appeared on television just 24 hours earlier, bright, composed, smiling. No one saw it coming. Not his friends. Not his colleagues. Not his players. Not even his family. The news shattered British football because it didn't fit the narrative. This was Gary Speed. Fit, focused, always in control. And that's the lie we still tell about mental health. Speed's death became a national conversation, not just about football, but about men, about how pressure hides behind smiles, how mental health isn't a weakness, and how even the strongest among us sometimes break. Tributes poured in from across the country, from Leeds, Everton, Newcastle, Bolton, from every player he managed, from fans who had never met him but suddenly felt like they had lost someone close. Wales qualified for Euro 2016, 5 years later. Many said it was Gary Speed's blueprint that got them there. He never got to see it, but he helped build it. Football is a loud game. Stadiums, celebrations, debates, but Speed's death was a reminder that silence can be louder than any cheer. We didn't just lose a manager, we lost a man, and the silence he left behind still echoes. 6. The Cape Coense plane crash, when football lost a team. There are losses, and then there are catastrophes. Moments where it's not just a player, it's an entire team. November 28th, 2016. A charter plane carrying Brazilian side Chapecoense crashes into the mountains near Medellin, Colombia. 71 people were killed. Players, coaches, journalists, staff. Only 6 survive. Only 3 of them footballers. They were on their way to play the biggest match in club history, the Copa Sudamericana final. A Cinderella story. A tiny team from southern Brazil punching way above their weight. A club with a stadium that held barely 20. 0 fans, now 1 win away from a continental title, and they never made it. The plane ran out of fuel. No mechanical failure, no storm, just bad planning. A tragic, preventable mistake. The football world didn't just mourn, it stopped. Across Brazil, stadiums held moments of silence. Fans lit candles. Thousands filled Chapecoense Stadium, singing through tears. They didn't chant players' names, they read them out, one by one, as if saying them could bring them back. Atlético Nacional, their would-be opponents, made the unthinkable gesture. They asked CONMEBOL to award Chapecoense the title. It wasn't just sportsmanship, it was humanity. And Chapecoense were crowned champions. Not for how they played, but for who they were. The crash exposed the fragile realities of smaller clubs traveling under tight budgets, cutting corners to keep the dream alive. And it changed how football looks at safety, logistics, and accountability. But the real impact wasn't policy. It was personal. A city lost its heroes. Families lost fathers, sons, brothers. And the world lost a reminder that football, no matter how big the game is, made up of real people with real lives. Chapecoense rebuilt. Slowly. Some survivors returned to the pitch. The club signed new players. The fans kept singing. But they'll never forget the night the music stopped. Because Chapecoense didn't just lose a match, they lost a future. 7. The Munich air disaster. The day Manchester United died and lived again. Manchester United wasn't just a football club in the 1950s, it was a phenomenon. Young, bold, and blazing through English football with swagger. They were called the Busby Babes, a squad built on youth, speed, and belief. They had just eliminated Red Star Belgrade to advance in the European Cup. They were on their way home. Then the plane stopped. February 6th, 1958. A chartered aircraft stopped to refuel in Munich. Snow, slush, ice. The first 2 takeoff attempts failed. On the 3rd, disaster. The plane never left the runway. It crashed through a fence and hit a house. It broke into pieces, and so did Manchester United. 23 people died. 8 of them were United players. Others were staff, journalists, and crew. The images were haunting. Twisted metal, Bloodstained snow, a team reduced to silence. Duncan Edwards, one of the brightest talents England had ever seen, clung to life for 15 days before passing away. He was just 21. Many said he could have been the best there ever was. Matt Busby, the legendary manager, survived barely. He spent months recovering, and then he came back, not just to coach, but to rebuild, and rebuild he did. 10 years later, in 1968, Manchester United won the European Cup, the very trophy they were chasing when they boarded that plane. With Busby on the sideline, with Bobby Charlton a survivor lifting the trophy, the circle completed. But Munich was never just a tragedy, it became a part of United's DNA. Every year, fans gather at Old Trafford, under the clock stopped at 4 p.m, the exact time of the crash. They sing, they remember, they honour. The Munich air disaster didn't just take lives. It took a generation, a style, a dream, but it also revealed something deeper about football, that from the darkest moments, the game still finds a way to rise. And Manchester United, broken in snow and silence, became a symbol of how you rebuild when everything is gone. 8. Andres Escobar, the own goal that cost a life. Andres Escobar was a calm, composed centre-back known as the gentleman of football, elegant in his tackles, disciplined in his play, respected by teammates and rivals alike. He was never supposed to be a villain, he was supposed to be Colombia's hope. The 1994 World Cup was meant to be Colombia's breakout. They had beaten Argentina 5-0 in qualifying. Pelé called them favourites. The country believed, but then came the match against the United States. Andres Escobar slid in to intercept a cross. Instead, the ball deflected off his foot and into his own net. Colombia lost. They were eliminated. And Escobar, the calm defender, was suddenly the face of a national failure. In most countries, that would have been it. A painful headline. A few harsh words, but not in Colombia. Not in 1994. Not when drug cartels were gambling millions on World Cup results. Not when football was entangled in power, money, and violence. 10 days later, Escobar went out to a nightclub in Medellin. He was trying to move on, live a normal life. He never made it home. In the parking lot, he was approached by a group of men. One of them pulled a gun. He shot Escobar 6 times. Reports say he shouted "goal" after each shot, like it was a joke, like it was justice. Andres Escobar was 27 years old. His death shook the entire world, not just because he was killed, but because he was killed for a mistake. A football mistake. The man who always played with grace was taken by a system with none. At his funeral, over 100 people lined the streets, not just to mourn a player, but to mourn what football had become, a game twisted by power, fear, and blood money. Years later, Colombia changed. The violence quieted, the football returned, but the memory of Andres Escobar never faded. Because when we talk about passion in football, this is what happens when it goes too far. 9. Cheick Tiote collapse in silence. Cheick Tiote wasn't a global superstar. He wasn't on magazine covers. He didn't score 30 goals a season. But to the fans who watched him, he was unforgettable, tough, relentless, reliable. He played midfield like it was a war zone, never backing down, never switching off. The kind of player every teammate wanted beside them, and every opponent hated to face. Tiote's most famous moment came in 2011. Newcastle were down 4-0 to Arsenal. They fought back, and in the 87th minute, the ball fell to Tiote. A rocket with his left foot. 4-4. The crowd exploded. The Premier League had witnessed one of its greatest comebacks, and Tiote was its hero. He wasn't flashy. He was the foundation. And for years, he held Newcastle's midfield together. In 2017, Tiote made a move to Beijing Enterprises in China. He was 30, still fit, still hungry, still the same workhorse he'd always been. Then one day he collapsed in training. No contact, no warning. He never got back up. Doctors rushed in. They tried to revive him. They couldn't. Cheick Tiote died of sudden cardiac arrest, 30 years old, healthy, active, focused on football. The news hit like a punch. Newcastle fans, Ivory Coast fans, his teammates, his family, they all said the same thing. How? How does someone that strong just drop. There were no warning signs, no headlines about injuries, just a perfectly fit athlete gone before the next match. Tributes came quickly. Johan Cabaye cried on air. Newcastle held a moment of silence. Former coaches called him the heart of their team. He left behind a wife, kids, and a legacy not of trophies, but of effort, of loyalty, of playing every minute like it mattered. Tiote's death was a reminder that even the fittest players aren't invincible, that even in training, football can turn cruel, and that the players we cheer for every weekend are human. Cheick Tiote never asked to be a star. He just wanted to play, and he gave everything until the very end. 10. Christian Atsu. The goal before the earth shook. Christian Atsu was a quiet story in a loud sport. Not the headline, not the spotlight, but always present, always fighting. A gifted winger with raw pace and a left foot that whispered more than it shouted. Born in Ghana, raised by struggle, Atsu rose through the ranks of the Right to Dream Academy before joining Porto. Then came Chelsea and loans across Europe. Everton, Malaga, Bournemouth. Then Newcastle, the club that gave him a real home. He never became a superstar, but that wasn't the point. Atsu played with humility, the kind of player who ran hard even when no one noticed, who made teammates better, not just highlight reels. In 2023, he joined Turkish side Hatayspor, a smaller club, a new start. On February 5, he scored a last-minute winner, a stunning free kick in stoppage time. His first goal for the club. It turned out to be his last. Hours later, the earth moved. A massive 7.8 magnitude earthquake struck Turkey and Syria. Entire cities collapsed. Buildings crumbled. Tens of thousands of lives lost. And Christian Atsu disappeared. For days, no one knew where he was. Initial reports said he had been rescued, then retracted, then silence. 9 days later, his body was found beneath the rubble. He had been trapped in his apartment. Gone, just like that. The football world grieved, but Ghana felt it most. Atsu wasn't just a player. He was a philanthropist. He paid school fees for orphans, built homes for prisoners, donated to countless causes, always quietly, always from the heart. His death wasn't just tragic, it was cruel. To survive everything, football, politics, constant loans, the pressure only to be taken by a falling building, the timing hurt even more. He had just reminded the world what he could do. One last goal, one last celebration. Christian Atsu died a hero, not because of how he played, but because of how he lived. In a sport obsessed with fame, Atsu's legacy is about something else. Kindness, quiet strength, and a final moment of brilliance before the world crumbled around him. We talk about football like it's immortal. Trophies last forever. Highlights live online. Names echo through stadiums. But the players, they're just people. And people leave us. In the last 30 minutes, we didn't talk about stats. We talked about loss, about moments that stopped the game, about families that never got goodbye, about fans who never got closure. Maradona, Salah, Jota, Reyes, Speed, an entire team in Chapecoense, 8 legends in Munich, a gentle defender named Escobar, a warrior like Tiote, a soul like Atsu. Different countries, different eras, same pain. Because these aren't just deaths, they're what-ifs. What if Salah had made it to Cardiff? What if Escobar never touched that ball? What if Tiote had one more checkup? What if? Football gives us legends, but it also takes them. Too early, too suddenly, too often. And maybe the hardest part is this: none of these stories feel finished, because they weren't. But maybe that's why we remember them. Not just for how they played, but for how much more there should have been. More matches, more minutes, more time. So the next time we talk about goals and trophies and stats, let's also remember the people behind them, the lives they lived, the ones they touched, the spaces they left behind. This isn't a tribute to loss. It's a reminder that football, at its core, is human. And every time we lose one of our own, we lose a little piece of the game. But we also keep something: their names, their moments, their legacies. Because in football, no one truly dies. As long as we keep telling their story,